Good morning. I'd like to call this press conference together. I'm Congresswoman Hilda Solis, representing the new 32nd Congressional District. And many of you are aware of my past involvement on environmental issues, in particular those that are affecting the San Gabriel Valley. It has come to my attention over the past few years that there's been some concern with respect to high rates of asthma that children are experiencing here in the district, but also the possible correlation between the mining industry and the health effects, the negative health effects that might have in our various communities. And I want to point out that the study that was released today, the environmental effects of gravel mining in Irwindale, California, basic information is not available to assess health and environmental risks in our community. That is kind of a misnomer, because there is some data available. The fact of the matter is that we're not getting enough of it provided to communities of interest appropriately in a timely fashion. So we're finding one of the things that this report outlines that was actually prepared by my office and Congressman Henry Waxman, through Special Investigations Division, Minority Staff Committee on Government Reform, actually leads me to believe that a lot more work has to be done in this area of monitoring the effects of the mining industry, not only as it affects rates of asthma and air pollution, but also with respect to water quality. And what we find in this report, and we had about 2,000 pages of data that came to our office as a result of some preliminary questions that were asked that are outlined in the report. Just basic questions about what potential effects could be derived and what data was available. That information came back to my office in raw form. There was no real interpretive report or summary that was provided by EPA, thus leading me and my staff to believe that we had to ask more questions. And after 3 months or so, we began to ascertain from some of the other local lead agencies, the City of Irwindale, as well as the AQMD and the Water Quality Authority, that there were some data gaps. There are data gaps that exist, and what data gaps means is that we're not receiving enough data that's appropriate, that is timely, or that perhaps the enforcement agencies that oversee this particular industry or industries has been somewhat lenient or lax in terms of data collection. From the report, I can tell you that there are serious holes in terms of the kinds of permit process that exists. You can go back and look to see what mines were evaluated or monitored. It's very sketchy. Some maybe 2 years ago, some anywhere in a span of 5 years, they have not been reviewed, or their permits are not up to date, and the EPA is rather confused about who actually obtains those permits. So I think there's a lot to go around, and I certainly don't want to point fingers at any one particular group, the mining industry, because they have provided a source of jobs and economic development in the county here in the San Gabriel Valley. They help to provide, they've been around for over 100 years, and they provided about 70% of the construction of roads that make it easier for us to commute around this particular area. But with that, I think that other industries that have a responsibility to abide by the Clean Air Act, this particular industry does not have that same level of scrutiny. And that could be for different reasons. Much of what I've learned also is that the gravel pits that were here didn't begin to be seriously monitored until, say, after 1976, because the law changed. So many of those owners of those pits are long gone. And some of those pits will not be reclaimed. That is to say that they will remain those big gaping holes. And you can see behind me, here's one picture here of the United Rock gravel pit, where in fact the mining has led to exposure of our water table. And that leads me to the other concern that I have with respect to the monitoring of our water table, because we know that we are a Superfund site. We know that there already exists traces of MTB, percolate, all these other very toxic contaminants that exist in our water table. But what effect does the gravel mining industry have in processing and also in conducting their operation? Are there any other added contaminants or ingredients that are also being put into a very permeable water table? Those are questions that I was not able to ascertain from the lead agency in charge of that. So what I would like to say is that one of the issues that comes to mind is, and this chart here I think provides a good indication of what the community has been telling me. The community has been telling me that they are concerned about what effects the pollutants are having that may be omitted from this particular industry. The high rates of asthma alone, I think, speaks volumes for what is happening here in the San Gabriel Valley. I don't pride myself on having to represent an area that has one of the most highest rates of asthma. It may not be solely attributed to this particular industry, but I can tell you that once we begin collecting data, which I hope as a result of this press conference today and the unleashing of this small report, that we could begin to do more research and identify the sources of asthma. And I think we can do that, and I hope that the other witnesses that I have here today to speak on that can address some of those concerns as well. One of the areas that I was somewhat distressed about was the way in which AQMD monitors the pits with respect to ambient effects in the air pollution. If you'll notice, looking at the chart, you'll see that some of the monitoring stations are placed in what I would think almost awkward positions, because they're not in an area that is adjacent to a particular mining pit or area that has been excavated. And so it's hard to catch that kind of data that would directly be affected by this particular industry. And I'm told that the AQMD's responsibility is to really look at the regional contaminants, not just one sole industry. But perhaps this is an area where the AQMD can begin to take a more responsible role and assist us in this. Since we are suffering from higher rates of asthma and perhaps other respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, then there should be some sense of notice here, where our public health is of great concern, and we ought to be placing more monitors or using different scientific methods. These are old monitoring posts that have been there for many years now. I would say to you that it's time for us to re-look at this, to reevaluate this issue, and to bring in all the lead agencies. And certainly our local municipalities have a responsibility as well. And I know the city of Irwindale has been attempting in the last few years to really work closely with the mining industry to secure more evaluation and oversight. They need to be pushed a little harder. But in that, I believe also that our other local municipalities that butt up against these gravel pits also have an ability and opportunity to say something as well. Because if their population is being affected, and I gave you a number earlier, 260,000 population that surrounds the gravel pits, I think this is everybody's concern here, not just the city of Irwindale, but also the surrounding communities here. And particularly because in many instances, our population is very transient. Most people don't live in the city of Irwindale. They live in Baldwin Park, they live in El Monte, they live in Duarte, they live in Azusa. We have many, many trucks that are bringing tons back and forth of gravel, and most of them spew diesel. And we know that diesel can also be a very detrimental contaminant that can harm our health as well. That needs to be looked at. Certainly the study here doesn't pretend to address all the issues. The biggest question that I can see is that there are a lot of unanswered questions, but one that still remains. Why do we have to experience higher rates of asthma? Why are we not able to get more information about the water quality that these mines have now touched? And also the effects with respect to, we're here today at this school site, Getty School site in Baldwin Park. Many of the children that live here in this surrounding area travel day in and day out, and their families do, exposed to the ambient, to the dust particles, to a lot of these other contaminants that surround this area. What quality of life do they have? They should be able to expect to get a better quality of life and to be able to access information. Public information is first and foremost. And that's really what we're trying to define here as well. That every community should be entitled, any family member that feels that they need to know more about what's happening with respect to this community and possible negative health effects, that they could be able to access that. Right now, if my own staff could not ascertain through looking through 2,000 pages of raw data, how would you expect a family who speaks only Spanish or maybe is not an English speaker to be able to ascertain that information? That to me is a derelict in terms of what our responsibility and role is. So I am very pleased to be able to share with you this report today, and I especially want to thank Congressman Henry Waxman, who's been a leader on environmental issues, for he allowing me to put this kind of question out there, so to speak, and then at the end of the day have a map, I hope, a roadmap that will lead us to other research data and better monitoring and oversight of this particular industry. With that, I want to recognize the mayor of Azusa, Cristina Madrid, who's been a longtime advocate also in environmental justice issues, and I'd like to ask her to come forward because we think when I met her back in 1992, one of the issues was with respect to saving our foothills and cleaning up the environment. So please welcome Mayor Cristina Madrid.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm glad to see that you've gotten a report done, and as the Congressman has said, I began to run for office in 1992 because of the rock quarry industry, which had a pretty strong death grip on the city of Azusa. Unfortunately, we were unable to stop them from quarrying the mountains, and they used a 1950s permit, which is one page long, to get the then existing city council to approve the scarring of the mountainside that you can now see and the excavation of the entire side of the mountainside. Is a great embarrassment to all of us residents in the city of Azusa, and part of the problem that we have because of all the air quality problems we have because of all the dust. They're a very tough industry. They are a very difficult industry. They are very sophisticated. Much more sophisticated than us locally elected individuals. And because of that, we have been able to take the natural raw products of our communities and leave us with big gaping holes, and leave us with dust on our streets, and dust in our homes, and worst of all, dust in our lungs. So I'm glad the Congresswoman has taken on this leadership, taken on this industry. I know it's not going to be an easy fight. I know there will be no quick solutions. I know that we have to begin to look at a new way of building our freeways, a new way of constructing homes and high-rises, so we don't have to create this horrible, horrible harm to our community, to our environment, and then have a freeway that we race through for some crazy reason. So I'm glad, Congresswoman, you've done this, and I know that it's a first step and it's a painful step, and I know it's not without a lot of controversy. And I appreciate being able to get something done that no one else has been able to get done until now. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I would like to invite up Dr. Konstantinos Siotas to come and speak a little bit about what these particulate matter, what they do, and how it affects us.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank Congresswoman Solis for inviting me here. It's a pleasure. I'm a professor at the University of Southern California. My field of expertise is air pollution. I'm actually here with my colleague, Professor Fine, who is also on our faculty. And I was asked to talk a little bit about particulate matter and what are these particles that we breathe. And I wanted to start my sort of my introductory talk by saying that the residents of this community are absolutely right in being terribly concerned about particulate matter that they breathe. I need to tell you that PM, which is particulate matter, which basically is those suspended little tiny particles in the atmosphere, the size of which varies from 50 to 1,000 times of that of the thickness of a human hair, poses the greatest challenge today for both the scientific as well as the regulatory community. The reason for that is that, unlike ozone, unlike nitrogen oxides, unlike carbon monoxide, which are gases of known composition and sources, particulate matter is actually a class of many subclasses of pollutants that come in different ranges and different chemical composition. The reason for that diversity in sizes and chemical composition is to do with the sources. Particles come from combustion, from diesel, from other vehicles that you see around, from the heavy-duty machinery that, for example, like the ones that they operate in the mining facilities around. They also come from what we call fugitive dust, which is basically resuspended particles from piles of dirt, whether deserts or like the things that they have at the gravel mining facilities. There is also atmospheric chemistry mechanisms, formation mechanisms that would disperse these particles in the atmosphere more uniformly, more regionally as opposed to locally. They are of particular concern because like gases, when particles deposit in our lungs, they stay a lot longer than the gases, so we exhale them. They tend to they're retained in the lungs much longer than gases. They also their deposition in the lungs is spotty. So in local areas of our lung, we have higher concentrations than, for example, a uniform depositing gas that would coat uniformly, but in so doing would dilute itself in our respiratory tract. There has been many studies, and this is ongoing research that links particulate matter to health effects, both epidemiological and toxicological studies. Some of these studies are also conducted through the Southern California Particle Center and Supersite, a research center that is funded by EPA, and the local California Resources Board, of which I'm the co-director. John Freunds at UCLA is the director. And one of the things that I need to tell is that, first of all, particulate matter has been linked to mortality. Depending on the location and the time of the year, which would affect the chemical composition of particles, anywhere from 0.5% to 3% increase in daily mortality rate have been linked to increases of 10 micrograms per cubic meter of particulate matter. To put in perspective, what is an increase of 10 micrograms per cubic meter? Today the concentration in Los Angeles is, that's the dangerous thing about being in this business. I can now tell you what the pollution is. I don't even need a monitor. It's about 20 micrograms to 25 micrograms per cubic meter, okay? If that concentration goes up to 30, so an increase of 10 micrograms, if you take the results of epidemiology at face value, that means that you're going to have probably a 1% increase in annual mortality rates. If the results of epidemiology are taken at face value, anywhere from 60,000 to 120,000 deaths annually in the United States are attributable not to air pollution, to particulate matter specifically. I mean, I'm leaving out other air pollutants. We also have now demonstrated an equivalently health effects, not just death, of course, which is a very significant health effect, but health effects like asthma, exacerbation of asthma in children. We have cardiovascular effects, other respiratory effects that are attributable to PM. It also, particulate matter, because of its nature, it's not exactly what we call a regional pollutant like ozone. It's a pollutant that has a very local source and local nature because of the sources that is emitted. We have done, for example, studies in which we've demonstrated that if you're next to a freeway or a busy street, or within, let us say, 50 yards from downwind of that freeway or street, you're exposed to 5 to 10 times higher concentrations of PM, or particulate matter, than you would be, a mile downwind. That has enormous implications in terms of assessing human exposure to PM, and also in terms of regulation. I was talking to Congresswoman Solis before a few minutes ago about AQMD and ARB's monitoring. And to their credit, actually, they're doing their best and they're operating with the underlying assumption that whatever monitor they have is fairly representative of the air parcel around it. Now, this may be correct for pollutants, that are regionally dispersed like ozone. It's not always correct when it comes to particulate matter that is so linked to its sources. And so to address that, you have to basically do research, and this is something that is impossible to do by AQM because they just don't have the resources. You have to do research on a case-by-case study. And the take-home message that I wanted to leave you with is that we the scientific community, we have the means today to come and study your air. We can tell you, for example, how particles from the facilities degrade and decrease as you move downwind. We can tell you the degree to which the emissions of the gravel mining facilities penetrate your home, because that's an important issue. Not just how much is out there, but how much gets into your house, because that affects ultimately your exposure. We can tell you their health effects. We can collect these particles and do toxicological studies very similar to what we do for other locations in Los Angeles. So you can do all of the above and we'll be very happy. But this is not a task that can be delegated to AQMD because they do routine compliance monitoring, and this is really not their business. But so to conclude, I first of all, again, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share this information with you, and you have every right to be very concerned about it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to introduce our local resident here, Linda Sheehy, who actually wrote to my office a while back regarding the issue of the gravel pits and asthma, and as it relates to her upbringing here in the San Gabriel Valley. So I'd like to introduce her and have her come and give us a few words. Thank you, Linda.
Hello, my name is Linda Cyberstad Sheehy, and I was born and raised in Azusa. When I married in 1970, my husband and I lived primarily in the Temple City, Arcadia area. In October 2000, we moved to Azusa. The water was no longer sweet, but then I figured it was because the pipes were old and dirty. 2 months later, my husband had a terrible asthma attack. It was so severe the doctors thought he had had a heart attack. He had never been diagnosed or treated for asthma, but the initial episode was so severe that he was in the hospital for 2 days in intensive care. He now carries an inhaler at all times. I use an inhaler occasionally. We sleep with our windows closed, and we buy bottled water. Now, my mother was raised in Azusa. My father worked for 40 years for a local quarry. They both use oxygen at night when they sleep because they both have very serious lung conditions. They sleep with their windows closed, and they buy bottled water. My son had bronchial spasms living here, but when he grew up and moved away, well, he didn't want to come back too often. He uses an inhaler. He doesn't come to visit very often because it hurts his lungs, and I miss him. I have read the summary of the study commissioned by Congresswoman Hilda Solis. There are no uniform regulations or reporting standards for this type of mining. Our health is slipping through the gaps. However, I am optimistic that there is a way to balance a healthy environment with the local mining industry from which we have derived so much benefit. I am trusting that Congresswoman Hilda Solis and other government officials will help us clean up the air and the water here in our area because we need both of them to survive. Thank you.
I again want to thank the Baldwin Park Unified School District for allowing us to have this press conference here at Geddes Elementary School, and also the principal here, Terry Slater, who was here a little earlier. I know we have some school board members here too. Thank you for being here. I believe everybody has a copy of the report. If there is any questions, we'll take some questions now.
Why is the news conference being held here? Are there health concerns among the children at this school?
I haven't actually asked the principal what health reports there are related here to asthma, but clearly for what I've been able to look at, the chart here again, if I could just reiterate, kind of gives a depiction. These are children that are known cases to have asthma, and the majority of these cases come from the San Gabriel Valley. So it isn't just Baldwin Park, who sits adjacent to a number of these gravel pits, but it is something that is of grave concern because I believe that our children, as many of us will say time and time again, are our future. And if their future is at risk because of their health, the quality of life, then I think we have to take notice of that. And government, on my part, federal government, I believe, has a responsibility to provide some answers for that. And I'm hoping that in all this, we could get EPA to fund special projects to look at this particular type of problem that we have here. And it isn't just Southern California or the San Gabriel Valley. We have rock quarries in San Bernardino, Riverside, as well as in Palo Alto and other parts of the country. I'm finding, in talking to my other colleagues in the Congress, that they're also faced with the same dilemma I am. There's very little data available in terms of monitoring what the effects are of this industry.
You think the school should be shut down or anything?
No, I don't think it should be shut down, and I know that many people live and work in this community and also work at the gravel pits. I would be very interested to get more information from those industries as well, to report to us what possible problems with health employees may have there or have had, and also a better look at our water table. Water quality here is something that the federal government has invested in through Superfund site funding and what have you. And this is just another area that we need to take a look at and be more responsible. There's no silver bullet here, and I really believe that we have to work in partnership with the industry, with our local municipalities, with the state, and the federal government, and all those responsible leaders, whether they be from city councils or school board members or health officials, to help come forward and provide some answers to this very, very pressing issue. Any other questions?
Are you and Congressman Waxman going to pursue any legislation on this, or are you going to perhaps require the EPA to be more proactive on this?
I know that I'm going to probably take another crack at this again and ask the EPA if they can provide us with a more thorough assessment, and probably have the Government Accounting Office take a role in this as well. This was just the Government Reform Committee and minority staff that actually helped us in compiling this report. So we didn't have the full force of the federal government assisting us in getting answers to these questions. And that's a problem. It's a problem that I think has to be addressed. So I'm hopeful that we might be able to get more support, because this isn't a partisan issue. There are people who live alongside in Duarte, in Monrovia, in Claremont that have the same concerns, whether they're Democrat or Republican, and we all want a better quality of life. So I think working in partnership with other members, we can also get some answers to these questions.
Even if the information is released, what can the public do with it at that point? Move out, or how can it be used?
I think they can get some answers to some of the questions they might have had, because if people are missing work because they have higher rates of asthma, if children aren't coming to school, I think I would be concerned, because then that means productivity here in this area is down. And if this school loses ADA because children are sick during certain times of the year, maybe summer, when it's a little hotter and there's more smog, there's more pollutants in the air, then yes, I would be concerned. And maybe the schools have to take some precautionary measures as well. And we have to somehow look at how we can address this issue. And I would hope that we could get more research dollars at our various universities and research institutes to really focus in on this issue. Because I think there are a lot of questions that have now been raised, and we definitely, I believe, want to have some answers. Thank you. Now I'd like to just briefly in Spanish. Okay, we'll do that separately. And please feel free to speak to our witnesses that are here. Dr. Constantinos, Ciotas, I'm sure has a lot of good information. Thank you.
Thank you.